The first time I noticed something was off, I told myself I was over. David had been working late, coming home distracted, his kisses. When I asked if something was wrong, he just smiled and said, "Just a lot on my plate, sweet." I believed him. Of course, I did. For 10 years, we had built a life together. Marriage built on love, trust, and shared dreams. But lately, something had changed. He was on his phone more, guarded, as if he were hiding something. When I reached for his hand at dinner, he barely reacted, but I pushed my doubts aside. Until the day I found it. I was organizing the closet when a small black velvet box caught my eye, tucked behind his stack of shirts. My heart skipped a beat as I reached for it, my fingers trembling. When I flipped it open, my breath hitched. Inside was a stunning diamond ring, sparkling under the light. My eyes burned with tears. This was it. The reason for his secrecy. The distance, the long nights at work. He was planning to propose to me again. A vow renewal, maybe? A second chance to say, "I do"? I pressed the box to my chest, relief and joy washing over me. Maybe I had been wrong. Maybe he still loved me just as much as he did on our wedding day. But then something gnawed at me. David and I had never talked about a second proposal, and he knew I wasn't a fan of surprises. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. I reached for my phone and searched his emails. My hands shook as I scrolled through his message until I saw it, a receipt. 1 diamond engagement ring, purchased 3 weeks ago. Recipient, Olivia Carter. My blood ran cold. I knew no Olivia Carter. The world around me blurred as realization slammed into me like a freight train. David wasn't planning to propose to me. He was proposing to someone else, while we were still married. The ring box sat on my nightstand, taunting me. At first, I tried to convince myself there had to be an explanation. A misunderstanding. A mistake. Maybe David bought it for a friend, helping someone else propose. Maybe Olivia Carter was a client, a relative, anyone but another woman. But deep down I already knew the truth. And once that doubt crept in, I started noticing everything. The way David flinched when his phone buzzed, angling the screen away from me. The sudden weekend meetings he never used to have. The extra cologne. The neatly pressed shirts when he was supposedly working late. The way he stopped saying "I love you" first. Every sign had been there, and I had ignored them. But not anymore. I waited until he was asleep, his breath slow and steady beside me. Carefully, I slid his phone from the nightstand, my hands shaking as I unlocked it. He never changed his password. He never had to. Until now. I opened his messages, my stomach tightening. Most of them were normal work, friends, unread notifications. And then I saw her Olivia Carter. My heart pounded as I clicked on the thread. At first, it was harmless. Casual conversations. Then "I can't wait to see you this weekend, missing you so much. You'll love the surprise I have planned. Just a few more days. Forever, Olivia. I promise." I bit down on my lips so hard I tasted blood. I scrolled further, my pulse hammering. And then, a reservation confirmation. Saturday, 8 p.m. The Monarch Restaurant, and attached. A note from David, the perfect place to ask the love of my life to marry me. I sucked in a sharp breath, my vision blurring. The love of his life. Not me. Not the woman he had spent 10 years with. He was proposing to her, while I was still his wife. Tears burned at the back of my throat, but I refused to let them fall. Not yet, because now I had a decision to make. Would I confront him, walk away quietly, or would I make sure his perfect little proposal became his biggest nightmare? I wanted to scream, to wake David up, shove his phone in his face, and demand to know how long he had been playing me for a fool. But I didn't. Instead, I sat in the darkness, gripping his phone. My mind racing. If I confronted him now, he'd lie. He'd twist the truth, gaslight me, tell me I was overreacting. No. I needed more than just messages. I needed undeniable proof. I needed to catch him in the act. For the next few days, I played the role of the devoted wife while secretly tracking his every move. I checked his calendar, watched his spending habits, noted every time he worked late. I followed him once, staying just far enough behind so he wouldn't notice. And that's when the pieces started to fall into place. David had a routine: morning coffee runs where he lingered too long, afternoons spent in places that had nothing to do with work. He wasn't just seeing Olivia, he was living a second life with her. And the most infuriating part? She had no idea he was married. She wasn't some homewrecker who knew about me and didn't care. From what I gathered, David had fed her the same lies he once fed me. He was the perfect boyfriend, charming, thoughtful, affectionate. The kind of man I thought I married. The betrayal burned deeper. How many nights had he come home to me after being in her bed? How many times had he kissed me while whispering "I love you" to her? I wanted to march into her life and tell her everything, to warn her, to ruin him. But I didn't, because I realized something. David was standing on the edge of his own destruction. He had built a house of lies so carefully, so flawlessly until now, all I had to do was let it crumble. So I waited for the moment when he would get down on one knee and offer another woman forever. Waited for the moment when he would realize I had taken away everything he thought he had control over. Because David wasn't just going to lose me, he was going to lose everything. I arrived at the Monarch 15 minutes early. The restaurant was just as grand as I expected: soft candlelight, expensive chandeliers, the quiet murmur of couples lost in their perfect little worlds. Tonight, one of those worlds was about to shatter. I had spent the last few days preparing for this moment. Not crying, not breaking, just waiting. David had no idea I was here. He had no idea what was coming. I spotted them immediately. David sat at a corner table, his back straight, a confident smirk on his face. Olivia, oblivious and beautiful, smiled at him, her eyes full of love. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The waiter arrived with champagne. The lights dimmed slightly. The moment was coming. I stood, smoothed my dress, and walked toward them. As I reached the table, David pulled something from his pocket. A small black box. My stomach clenched, but my expression remained cool. He was about to get down on one knee when I spoke. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." The words sliced through the room like a knife. David froze, his head snapping toward me. His eyes widened in horror, his mouth parting slightly like his brain was struggling to process how I was standing there. Olivia blinked at me in confusion. "I'm sorry. Who are you?" I smiled. "I'm his wife." The restaurant went silent. A murmur rippled through the tables. Olivia let out a stunned laugh, shaking her head. "What? That's not David. Tell me, this is a joke." David looked like he had been hit by a truck, his face drained of color. "Anna, I can explain." I let out a soft chuckle. "Oh, I know you can. You've been explaining things for years, haven't you?" I turned to Olivia. "Did he tell you he works late? That he travels for business? That he was divorced? Maybe—" Olivia's lips parted, her hands trembling as she stared at David. You said you weren't married." David reached for her, desperation in his eyes. "Olivia, please." She jerked back as if he were poison. The ring box slipped from his hands, clattering onto the table. I leaned in, voice low and steady. "You didn't just cheat, David. You built an entire lie. And now you get to live in it alone." His breath quickened, his eyes darting around the room as whispers and judgment filled the air. For the first time, he looked powerless. And I had never felt stronger. David's face was pure panic. "Anna, please just listen to me," he begged, his voice a frantic whisper. But I wasn't listening. Not anymore. The weight of heartbreak that had crushed me for weeks was gone, replaced by something else: clarity. I straightened my shoulders, tilting my head slightly. "David, the only thing I have left to say to you is goodbye." His mouth opened, closed. He reached out, but I took a step back. Olivia, still in shock, stood abruptly from the table. "You lied to me," she said, her voice trembling. You made me believe we had a future. David turned to her, grasping for anything that could keep her from slipping away. Olivia, I swear, I was going to tell you. She let out a bitter laugh. When, before or after I became your next wife? His jaw tightened, but he had no answer. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, not sparing him another glance. David looked at me again, pleading. Anna, you don't have to do this. I smiled, slow and deliberate. Oh, but I do. I reached into my bag, pulling out a manila envelope, and dropped it onto the table in front of him. His fingers hesitated before flipping it open. Divorce papers. I've already filed, I said, enjoying the way his breath caught. And since you were so distracted, you forgot to sign the prenup override. His head snapped up, panic flashing across his face. That means, I continued, sipping the champagne meant for her, I get half of everything. Silence. David gripped the edges of the table, his nostrils flaring. You're ruining me. I set the glass down, grabbed my purse, and turned toward the exit. Then I looked back at him, one last time. No, David, I said softly. You did that to yourself. Then I walked away. As I stepped outside, the cool air filled my lungs like a fresh start. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for love. I wasn't fighting for someone's attention. I was free. And that was worth more than anything he could have ever given me.